Hello and welcome back to the Planning Pulse podcast. With you as always, Matt Harvison, the principal practice lead for all things Workday Adaptive Planning at Corio. Joining me for the first time today on the podcast, I've got Wesley DeMarco. Wesley, how we doing?
Doing great, Matt.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. Excited for you to be here. We are continuing down the path of getting into budget season, prepping our listeners for budget season. We're doing tips and tricks for things that they may not know exist inside their current adaptive instance. But before we do that, Wesley, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, Matt. So I am living in the DC area. I've been a consultant on adaptive planning for just over 4 years now. Enjoying the work and continuing to learn new stuff and trying to pass that along to listeners.
No, I love that. I love that. So, a little bit over 4 years. Yeah, I know you really just told me a little bit about adaptive. You have any hobbies, anything that you like to do outside of work?
Absolutely, Matt. Love to play soccer, big sports guy. Very excited for the upcoming World Cup, so kind of getting my ducks in a row for that.
I love it. I love it. Now, I know that I asked you, what do you do outside of work? Us at Acorio, we live for work. We want to make sure all of our customers are taken care of, all of our listeners are taken care of. So let's get into the topic for today, getting those folks ready for budget season. I know, Wesley, you've got a very interesting topic for us today. We're going to be talking a little bit about virtual versions that exist inside of Workday Adaptive Planning. When we think of versions, a lot of people think actuals or they think budget. In fact, there's a lot of different types of versions that exist inside of Adaptive, right? We've got actuals, we've got sub-actuals that are used for things like eliminations or journal entries, any type of adjustments that consolidate into your total consolidated actuals. We've got multiple versions of plan versions. Maybe talk us through a little bit about what virtual versions are and how they compare to the other versions that exist inside of Adaptive.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple kind of notable aspects of virtual versions that are unique to them and instead of others. So first, they are read-only. What they do is they connect to a base version, which is where the data will come from, and then you can also layer on exchange rates from other versions. So what that allows you to do is kind of remove the impact that FX plays on reporting so you can compare apples to apples across different versions, whether it be actuals, budgets, or forecasts.
Gotcha. So virtual version is going to be a big player for all of our customers that are multi-currency environments. Got it. Is there any use case that you can think of that, you've got a customer right now who's using it, or how do you see your customers using virtual versions today? Is there, any specific use cases there?
Absolutely. There's two main use cases that I see my customers use, and one of them actually doesn't require the use of currency reporting. So even customers who don't necessarily utilize FX can still see the benefit of virtual versions. So I'll
Okay.
start with that one. It's a little more simple. And I can jump in and share my screen to
Yeah, that
show
would be great. Yeah,
a bit
absolutely. If
about
you don't
that.
mind, that would be fantastic.
So um, on my screen, you can see there's a virtual version that I prepared here. Um, And within this version, it's quite simple, not too many options to select from. You have your base version, and then with this little edit button off to the right, you have your exchange rate version. The
Okay.
use case that I see clients use who don't employ FX, it's quite simple. Essentially, what you can do is update the version through reports by this selection. So what I mean by that is if you are reporting on a virtual version, and if you have dozens of reports, instead of going into each and every one of those reports and either editing the report or updating a parameter, you can come into this selection, switch the report you're pointing at, or the version you're pointing at, and all reports will update with that change. So that will hold true for matrix reporting. That will be true for Office Connect reports. And so it can really simplify that rollover to a new reporting version whenever that situation arises.
Oh, excellent. I see that you've got some reports pulled up here as well. Maybe we can walk through an example of what those reports may look like with some of these updates.
Absolutely. So this is an example of a fairly simple functional P&L. It is pointed at our virtual version. And so if we save this change here that I just made, instead of reporting on the working budget, we are now reporting on the FY25 budget. a simple refresh would show that this data has now shifted to a new set of data. So it can cut back on the time it takes to update reports. Furthermore, it can really simplify the navigation for end users, especially read-only users who are consuming the reports. You can almost take out any kind of version management out of their hands and have an administrator control what is available to those users.
Yeah, absolutely. So you'll find inside of Adaptive, there's a lot of different features and functions, just like virtual versions that are lesser known features that our customers may be using. But, sitting with someone like yourself, Wesley, and talk through, this is how we see other customers using some of these features or some of these tools can really help open your eyes to, how could we be doing things differently inside of Adaptive? Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, anything else that you wanted to show us inside of the instance today?
Absolutely. Yeah. So there's one other function here that I see virtual versions used for often, and that is the constant currency reporting tool. So with that, you have the same base version selection, and we did take a peek at the addition of the exchange rates. So in this case, we have the ability to select our base version, which will have this FY25 budget, and then we can also select the exchange rate that is applied to that base data. So in this case, I'm applying the actuals exchange rate to the budget version so that in a report, when we compare versions, they are guaranteed to be using the same exchange rates, which allows us to really isolate the performance of those and ensure that there's no FX impact driving the variances. And so allowing us to compare using the same rates guarantees that it's an operational view and no other impact is coming from FX.
Yeah, I think you kind of hit the nail on the head there, right? We utilize virtual versions so that we can compare apples to apples. We can actually look at the underlying data rather than allowing the frequent fluctuation of FX rates to impact or skew our vision of what we're actually seeing here from our plans. Well, Wesley, really appreciate you walking through virtual versions. Like I mentioned, there's a lot of different version types that exist inside of Adaptive. There's actuals, there's plan versions, there's what if scenarios now. Virtual versions, one of those lesser used or lesser known functions that exist inside of your Workday Adaptive Planning environment. Wesley, anything else that you may want to mention before we wrap this week's episode of the Planning Pulse podcast?
No, I think this is what I had to present today, but if there's any questions on this, feel free to engage and we can follow up.
Yeah, absolutely. And just like Wesley mentioned, if there's any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at sales@ikorio.com. We'd love to answer any questions that you may have. We'd also love to customize some of our upcoming episodes of the Planning Pulse podcast. And speaking of upcoming episodes of the Planning Pulse podcast, we're going to continue our tips and tricks heading into budget season so you can catch our next episode next week. You can plan on it.